So we'll get started in just a moment here, guys. We're get everything set up. We're going to give people a few more minutes to come in. Um, take a minute to get your drinks. Get comfortable. We'll get started at 12:02 as soon as everybody arrives. Hope everybody's having a great day so far. We're nearing the end of the week, and I know Dan and I are really excited to talk to y'all, and really talk about some of the things that we've got going on here. It's been an interesting year for everyone in electronics manufacturing and the supply chain world, and I think we're all hoping for some better times ahead, and that, maybe that'll be coming soon, but either way, this is an opportunity for, I think, for everyone to kind of look at, new tools and techniques and, how we can better use data to work around some of these issues. All right, we're getting pretty close here. I think we've just about got everyone in. Like I said, I'll give them until 12:02, and then we'll go ahead and kick this off. All right, looks like we got a good enough party here, and we're right at 12:02. So, welcome everybody. Today, we're going to be talking about moving faster and working around supply chain disruptions. We've got Altium here with Dan, and we've got MacroFab with myself. And we can go ahead and move forward here, Michelle. All right. So, Dan, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so first off, thanks to you, Chris, and the MacroFab team for hosting this, and thanks to everybody that's joining us as well too. Dan Schoenfelder. I've been in the electronics industry for 20 plus years. I had the great fortune of joining the Altium team in mid 2007. I originally joined to lead the business operations of Octopart, and then have since taken on kind of overall responsibility for the entire operation at Octopart. And I've also recently, in the last year, taken on also revenue responsibility for our new Nexar business unit, which we'll talk, I think quite a bit about in our conversation today. Prior to my time at Altium, I was in the digital strategy group at Aero Electronics for several years, and then before that, I was in contract manufacturing at Flex. So the work being done at MacroFab is near and dear to my heart from some of the things that I've experienced in my past.
Thanks, Dan. It's great. It's great to have you here today. We've been working together through Octopart and MacroFab for years now, and I'm glad that we're able to talk. Now, for those obviously unfamiliar with me, my name is Chris Church. I am the co-founder and chief product officer here at MacroFab. My background is really in software technology and robotics and manufacturing. Started a number of companies in each of those spaces, and I've done everything from product design to sourcing to actually working on the manufacturing line over the past 20 years, and now working on making manufacturing easier for our customers. So today, our agenda, we're going to first learn a little bit about Nexar, because I'm sure many of you are, well aware of who Altium and Octopart are, but Nexar is a very new thing they're working on, and I think this is a great opportunity to talk about that. I'm sure fewer people are familiar with MacroFab than Altium, so I'll give you guys an introduction into what we do and why we have so much to say on the subject. And then Dan's going to lead us through the current state of the component supply chain with the view that Octopart has on that. Then we'll talk about some of the strategies we have to respond to the changes in the supply chain and the risks that are out there, and how we can use platforms like MacroFab to resolve that. Finally, we will get into some of the future, some of the things that Altium and or Nexar and MacroFab are working on together, and then we'll have some time for your questions. So Dan, why don't you tell us a little bit about Altium?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So Altium took on kind of a new organizational structure over the last year, and that organizational structure was really intended to have a couple of outcomes to it. First is an outcome that we've had vision for a long time, and that is transformation of the electronics industry. But the second one is really important, much more important to the near term for us, and that's enabling Altium's transition to the cloud. It's something that we feel is core to our future success and core to user experiences that we power as well too. So I want to touch first on kind of our board and systems division. That is the business unit that people are probably most associate with Altium, and our flagship product, which is Altium Designer. It's what I would consider to be the ubiquitous PCB design tool in the industry, and the other tools that are associated with that are Nexus, which allows Altium Designer users to bring in add-ons like PLM, and add-ons like simulation to their experience as well too. But our suite of tools inside the board and systems division range all the way down to something like a circuit maker, which is a free tool, and something that has a very low barrier to entry, and it is good for entry-level designers to get started on new designs. I think one thing that you'll find in common amongst Altium Designer, Nexus, and the circuit maker experiences are that they're all desktop software, which is why we're really excited about Altium 365, it being our first legitimate cloud platform for electronics professionals, and allows us to connect users of our design suite to supply chain data, connect them to tools that allow for greater collaboration than has ever been possible inside of Altium tools. And the underpinnings to a lot of this is what you'll see is kind of here in this diagram is the Nexar API. So I'll talk a little bit now about what the Nexar business unit is. It's a collection of both businesses, but it's also underpinned, and at the backbone of it is the Nexar API itself. I come from the Octopart side, and Octopart, for those that don't know, is a search engine for electronic components. Our mission has really been, since day one, democratizing data around parts, so that users can easily find pricing, availability, technical specifications for a device, data sheets, images, anything that's related to component-specific part data. Upverter is a modular design tool, and Ultimate is kind of our newest foray of this group, and it's really connecting users to manufacturing, and that is part of one of the key areas of collaboration that we have with the MacroFab team too, and something that we'll be able to unveil more about in the future as it becomes closer to realization. But again, I wanted to note that Nexar is a platform that's designed to serve an industry. Yes, we have stakeholders inside of Altium, of course, when it comes to part data and information, but Nexar isn't an exclusive entity to Altium. It's something that operates in service of an industry as well too. Whereas the board and systems division of Altium is more design focused and user focused on those designs. Michelle, do you mind going to the next slide, please? And just to get into a little more detail on what the Nexar business unit is, it's really the mission behind it is to programmatically connect what we view as historically disparate domains in this industry. And those are the design, the supply chain, and manufacturing domains. And you can see why a strategic alliance with MacroFab makes sense, as I think the corporate ideals that both organizations have align very closely around this. To reiterate, Nexar is platform as a service business. We've done an excellent job thus far, and we will continue to do this, but we're growing and cultivating a community of software solutions, of PLM, of MCAD partners, of component manufacturers and distributors and sellers of components, to data creators and content creators, whether it's CAD models and symbols and footprints, or folks that put together part data on risk and life cycle, and then also manufacturing service providers, and bringing these all together through the API, through what I would call partnerships of contribution and partnerships of consumption, where we have partners that are bringing things to this environment via the API, and we have partners that are pulling things like parametric data to parts in solutions via the API. So it's a very exciting, I would say, new business unit for Altium, and something that we think is going to fuel growth for us going forward. And it's also the part of the cornerstone of our connection to MacroFab. And with that, Chris, I'll turn it over to you.
Excellent. Thanks, Dan. And so at MacroFab, to put it very simply, we are a digital electronics manufacturing platform. To go a little further beyond that, however, our focus is really to turn electronics manufacturing into more like a cloud service. Thinking about some of the key concepts that we care about from a technology, from a cloud perspective, is, do I have elasticity? Can I move my production up and down to respond to my customers' needs in real time? Can I scale up very quickly with one manufacturer instead of having to switch factories? These are all the sorts of things that we work with our customers to enable. We launched in 2013, and today we work with about 2,000 companies. We manage their manufacturing workloads from prototypes to high volume in North America. So we work in Canada, US, and Mexico. We're not working in Asia or anything like that. So we really help a lot of our companies manage both disparate production capacities for different kinds of products. So you imagine if you have a high volume, a mid volume, and a low volume product, with MacroFab you don't have to go to 3 manufacturers. We have factories all over North America, and we can handle any level of volume in there. But one of the key things about the experience with MacroFab, as Dan talked about APIs a minute ago, we look at information sharing in real time, both with the backend services that are required to make this happen, and with the customer themselves. So we really focus on making a very rich interactive platform where you can upload your design files, instantaneously get a quote, get the lead times, you can get risk information in real time coming out of your bill of materials. You can see what exactly is driving the cost of your product, and you can plan future production all in one platform. And with our connection with Nexar, we're able to get a lot of data in real time and really make that a much better experience on our customers. So Dan, why don't you tell us a little bit from Octopart's perspective here on how things are looking in the supply chain world today?
Yeah, I'm sure there are people that are interested in this. I would first like to say that we at Altium, we view the space that we sit in is that we have a unique seat. We have information and interactions with data points that range from design tools to APIs to search engines like Octopart. And we feel like that uniquely positions us to provide insights as to what we think is happening in the industry, and has a breadth of viewpoints that few organizations in the electronic space have. So that's something that we feel is unique to us. I'd also like to say about just the general trends is that I think most of the people that I speak with in the industry are just kind of still shocked as to the state of affairs right now. It's unprecedented is one way to frame it, and hopefully I'll show you some data here that kind of speaks to the magnitude of what we're seeing now versus what we've seen historically when there have been component shortages that have impacted certain technology categories. But what's showing right now on the screen is something that is an index of essentially all the signal that we're getting from a supply chain perspective in the organization. It looks at searches, it looks at interactions with various elements of part data, and it aggregates that in a way that we can compare it to prior periods of time to see just what does the general interest and sentiment look like across the industry. And so when we look at Nexar or Altium as a whole, and the signal that we're getting there, right now, what the activity that we're seeing from a supply chain perspective is 140% of what we saw in the same period a year ago. And that's a tremendous amount of growth. That's growth that, again, is unprecedented as far as our ability to track historically what we're able to see in this industry. But I also want to highlight that there are pockets of the industry right now that even exceed that. And I think most who are listening in are aware that there have been like a very acute problems when it comes to semiconductors. And part of what's playing out in part of this data here for us is what you see here with this Texas Instruments piece of information, which is that for that same period of time, Texas Instruments' specific interest in parts and interaction with, from a supply chain perspective with the data we have, is up over 400%. So, and we're seeing that across several semiconductor manufacturers. It's something that, again, is just unprecedented levels of activity, due primarily to scarcity of componentry. It's very hard to obtain specific values of parts at this point in time. Michelle, can you go to the next slide, please? One thing that I do want to highlight as well, too, is that from an Octopart perspective, we've seen a tremendous growth in the number of unique users year over year. 72% outpaces any growth that we've seen year over year historically for our business. But the counterpoint to that or countermeasure is how much activity are those users undertaking when they arrive at Octopart. And we're seeing nearly a twofold increases in the number of searches that are occurring on Octopart to the growth in users. And the way that we interpret this internally is that what we're seeing is probably from a growth perspective of searches and activity, it's probably not sustainable. There's likely speculation that's occurring there. There's the fact that searches in and of themselves are outpacing our user acquisition is something that's indicative of a market imbalance that does not seem to be sustainable. Do you mind going to the next slide? Thanks, Michelle. And this is one of my favorite views of search activity at Octopart. What you're seeing here on this slide is 5 years of history comparing year over year growth by week. So we are currently in week 42 of 2021, which is where this analysis kind of ends. But you'll see some historical trends in this data. And when I first showed this slide to Chris, he pointed it out immediately that 2018 was a very good year for search growth at Octopart, and a remarkable year. And we both nodded our heads and agreed that that was a time of scarcity and a time it was difficult to get certain values of capacitors and other passive devices at that time, but capacitors were kind of leading the bunch. So absolutely, you can within this chart spot trend data of macro market conditions that existed inside of the electronic component space. But what you're seeing now in 2021 is, again, unprecedented. It's a level of change year over year that is more than double anything we've seen for any year over year period in Octopart's history. It's something that I'm not sure most people have many answers to as to how to address this at this point in time, because lead times have become irrelevant in some cases. Lead times at a minimum are inaccurate in many cases, and it becomes very challenging to plan accordingly. Some of the questions that I get asked most about the industry as well too are, what happens next? When do we expect to see a softening of lead times? When do we expect to see component availability return to something that's normal? And what our data suggests is that this is not ending anytime soon. And it aligns with the anecdotes that you hear. I mean, one thing that I've talked to our team about a lot, and I've talked to others in my circle, is it's really interesting to see this industry on the front page of the news nearly every day, if not every week at a minimum. It's not normal. Like I've been around a long time in this industry, and I think we'll all admit it's way too boring for front page news every week. But unfortunately, we find ourselves in a position where we see, I think it was the CEO of ST Micro recently announced that they expect their shortages to, in some form, last until early 2023. Or this week also, the Secretary of Commerce commented on extended lead times in the semiconductor space and things the government is trying to intervene in to help. Unfortunately, I think we all know that some of the investments that are being made in capacity are not going to help us in the short term. They are potentially 3 to 5 years on the horizon of beginning to solve any of the problems that we're seeing today. So I want to stay out of the prediction business because I think it's a risky one to be a part of. But I do want to say that in kind of summary of some of the trends that we're seeing here is that we see a continued acceleration right now in aggregate for part demand. And it's something that I think is going to continue well into next year. I think at the midpoint of next year is going to be anybody's guess, but I would say that we're going to see times of scarcity, times of extended lead times continue at least for the next 6 months.
Excellent. Yeah, no, it's yeah, I think it's really interesting looking at that from the search perspective, because I hear about this all the time. A customer comes in, hey, why can't you get this part? I'm gonna go look it up in Octopart, right? Everybody is looking for supply out there right now. We have purchasing teams that are kind of in running around their manufacturers, and manufacturers that are trying to get ahead of their customers' purchasing teams, and everybody's really in a bit of a pickle right now. And I'd like to add a little more color to on the other side of the search data, what are the real impacts here? So if we can move forward on the next one. So as Dan pointed out, we're not really in the prediction business either, but we're very certain that the supply chain will be uncertain through all of next year. We're hearing that from component manufacturers, from distributors, from tier ones. Everyone I speak to is making a plan to deal with shortages through 2022. Now, as Dan alluded to a minute ago, we saw something very similar in 2018. We had the great passive crunch, and in my experience, I thought, man, this is terrible. I hope we never see anything like this again. And I didn't expect that we were going to get something much, much worse. So right now, what we're seeing is that all categories of electronics components are being impacted, and not always for the same reasons. So semiconductors are being impacted, through supply constraints, at the fabs, materials moving around. But we're also seeing a lot of components which shouldn't be seeing significant supply constraints, experiencing those. And part of what we're seeing and we're hearing through the market right now is that there is some overbuying and hoarding going on when people can get stock. They have a tendency to put in a lot of orders with a lot of places. And one of the big things we're seeing is a huge shift through the alternative phase. A lot of designs that wouldn't have adjusted their alternates before, or would not have actually executed alternate buys, are very quickly going out and doing those. And what we'll see is a component that has had pretty stable stock for a while, all of a sudden becomes a critical component and it's difficult to get. And that's usually being indicated to us by people who are switching out to their alternates. And the other interesting thing here is when we saw in 2018, we were getting frustrated with factories giving us, 18, 24-week lead times to manage their capacity. Uh, we're getting lead times now 52 weeks, 120 weeks, and those are basically indicators of don't ask us about this part. We don't want to supply it to you, right? We have no interest. There's no foreseeable supply we're going to be able to give you. And that's one of the things I think is really important when you're looking at somewhere like Octopart or the MacroFab platform, and you're seeing these really long lead times. That is not an indicator that, oh, it'll come back in stocks, in the next year and we'll be fine. It's an indicator that you need to make a different design decision. So, kind of thinking about how we respond to that and what are the things that we can do to help give us a leg up in this market. We can go ahead and move forward. One of the things that we really highly suggest to everybody is bringing your supply chain information as early as possible into the design stage. So you can do that through Altium. That's one thing. Altium does give you visibility into your materials as you're designing through Nexar and through Octopart, and we can do that in MacroFab. So as engineers come in and prototype on our platform, we're showing them as they're putting in the volumes they want to produce, which materials we're isolating those very, very quickly and very easily and showing where there are stock issues. And we can see here, just on this one design I've got lead times from 35 weeks to 52 weeks. That is unsustainable. I cannot produce that board with those kind of lead times. So, as I go forward, I need to do something about this. So we'll go ahead and advance. Um, there are two traditional strategies that we would employ as a product designer or a product owner for dealing with supply chain shortages. One is, for things like passives, very common parts or stuff that's been out for a very long time and is low complexity. There typically are form fit function alternatives. We call them FFF alternatives. And that it's pretty straightforward. We're going to try to find as many alternatives as possible so that we have the highest probability that as we execute an order, we're going to be able to supply all of those. On the other hand, for more complex components, these are like your microprocessors that have very specific functionality, things like, air quality sensors, et cetera. Those don't typically have form fit function equivalents. So where we need to go from there is actually thinking about creating design variants. And this is the one, I would say a year ago, it was impossible to have this conversation about creating a variant with a customer. Like, no, go find me alternates, just go get the stock. Today, this is a conversation we have on a weekly basis with multiple customers, right? What are our strategies going forward? Let's go into a redesign phase to add a second version of this that gives us equivalent functionality in the end product, but uses a different base set of components. That, for many products, is the path forward right now. I often hear, hey, I'm building a whole bunch of this. Can't you just go get it for me on the strength of my volumes? I'm like, but you're going into a market with automakers and other, consumer devices that have substantially higher volumes, and they're locking up that inventory. As soon as it's coming out, someone who's, $100 million a year customer with a manufacturer, I hate to say it, will get preference over somebody that's buying $1 million or $500,000 worth of components from that manufacturer. So we really have to think about the strategies we can employ and get ahead of them. If you're going into a design phase in a new product and you're seeing through things like Octopart or through the MacroFab platform, you have some supply chain risks out there, don't assume they're going to get solved by the time you get to manufacturing, that the market's going to get better, that part's going to be findable. Instead, assume that you may have to create a variant up front and go ahead and start vetting that out. So when time goes to be at production, you really are ready to pull the trigger on that. And with the MacroFab platform, that is something we enable. If we'll go to the next slide. In here, within the platform, we enable both paths very easily. And you can actually do this in Altium as well. You can create design variants, you can snapshot those off, have your manufacturing packages ready. But just kind of speaking from our platform's perspective, as we're showing you that BOM, we're showing you the components with problems, we can very quickly kick off a search through Nexar, looking for other potential components, and with a click of a button, add them to that alternate list. Now, once they're in that list, and we know there's going to be enough supply across all these different parts, the second I put an order in, that platform automatically makes the right decision about how to build that product for your next production run. Now, when I have to do design variants, I have to keep track of those. So within our platform and similarly within Altium Designer, you can very quickly, with a few clicks, start to create a variant, starting from where you were before with all that information, and then just make the changes you need to make and have those prepared. And if we move forward a little bit here, um, one slide, yeah, there we go. And so that's where, with us as a platform, we don't just work with engineers, we work with engineers and their purchasing teams. So what we enable our customers to do in these kinds of situations is actually go out there, create those variants, get them designed, run the prototypes in parallel. Again, they can click order. We can put in 5 different prototypes, get them turned around in 10 days or so. And then once those prototypes have been vetted, they can then be approved for purchasing by the purchasing team. So we're not having to go back and forth, have manual communications about, well, use this alternate set for this production run or use this variant. The purchasing team can come in and simply just pick and choose what they want to purchase when they need it, enabling them to very quickly respond to the changes in the market. Um, Now, one of the challenges we often know when we're running different design variants out there and we have products going out to customers, one of the challenges we'll run into a lot is when I'm sending out to one customer one variant and another customer another, how do I keep track of what was different between those? Maybe I start getting more warranty claims on one variant than another, or I'm having a higher fill failure rate. And that's the other thing that we work with our customers by giving them a real-time design change tracking, so they can go look at the 2 different orders of the products that they have shipped out, see what's different between those, and see which areas they need to quickly go in there and address. And that's, kind of thinking about, it's not enough to have the variants. It is important to be able to have tracking and control and understand how those variants are, differing in any behavior, and the ability to pull up that information on the fly and be able to react to any changes out there. Now, we talk about ordering, and that'll be our next slide. One of the key things, we really talk with customers a lot about is really having a lot of flexibility in your supply chain. Traditionally, we talked about the flexibility of production volumes, right? I sometimes need 500 units in a month, and I sometimes need 5,000 units in a month, depending on what my sales trajectories are. Now we're talking more and more with customers about, how I can run enough product of one design to consume that material that's available there, while also running another product of another variant using the other material to meet my demand. And that's something, really, whether you're working with us or a traditional contract manufacturer or anyone else out there, you really need to be planning these kinds of adaptive strategies. Really, thinking about how do you respond very quickly within minutes, hours, or days of materials going out of stock. And we found a lot of people have been caught, a little flat-footed by that. They weren't ready to make design changes when the design changes were happening. They weren't prepared with their tracking systems, their information management to know what was going on. And often there was a disconnect between their customer demand and their ability to respond. So no matter who you're working with, and no matter what systems and tools you're using, consider a design variant strategy throughout the entire organization. The impact it's going to have on your purchasing team, your logistics. If suddenly you've got different barcodes on products in your warehouse and they were used to working shipping out just one product, are they prepared for that? And is the engineering team ready to quickly adapt to what's happening out there? And that's something, from my perspective, agility is key in today's market. And any tool, any information system you can get, which increases your agility, will be the ticket to success right now. Okay. So if we want to move forward. All right. So now with Dan and I here, MacroFab and Nexar are partners. We are working together, every day to help enable our customers to better succeed, whether it's design engineers, supply chain professionals, or the factories we work with today. Our focus is to enable everybody to succeed. And we feel that we're in a unique position, and I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the things that we're going to be working on and kind of give you guys an overview of what this partnership means from a data perspective as we go forward and look through the next year and see how we can, help each other to respond to the changing market conditions. So just kind of looking at the two companies, right? Here at MacroFab, we currently manage over 97,000 different PCB designs for 2,000 OEMs, and those are everything from prototype designs, products that didn't make it, to stuff that's in production and their variants. Whereas if you look at the data set that Nexar has, that's 56 million components with 300 distributors and 5,000 manufacturers. And in addition to that real-time searching data, which Dan showed us, we're seeing real-time pricing data. One of the things that I think we didn't get a chance to talk about is not only is the supply chain getting harder, is it harder to get materials? When you can get them, the prices are going up pretty substantially. And that is another thing that's driving some of those redesigns. I had a customer tell me they were used to putting a $3 part in their box, in their design, and they needed a couple hundred units to absolutely tomorrow to meet that demand. That $3 part became a $300 part. Because once that availability drops, people start going, well, this inventory I have is a lot more valuable, isn't it? And so with the Nexar data, we're able to do that real-time pricing, see the risk analysis. You bring in CAD models and the data sheets and the parametric data in real time. And so our focus moving forward is to connect that design data, the manufacturing information, and that supply chain data in real time to give you new opportunities and new options. One of the things that we're working on, for example, is a real-time risk analysis, right? Where are the problems going to be in my board, right? How do I resolve these, and how do I utilize that market information to make my design more producible? And Dan, I know
Yeah,
you guys have such an amount of data, over there that you're able to see stuff that we can't see today, right?
Yeah, I'd like to comment on two things kind of specifically. One is that I really do want to note that this is robust technology that we're talking about here. This is not something that's being built on the fly or not well thought through. The APIs that we've developed that support this have supported over 10 billion lifetime calls. That is a lot of calls to an API, and it speaks to the value that this information can have across the industry. And the second point that I'd like to make too is that a lot of what I've shared today and what Chris has shared today has been focused on some of the challenges that are in front of us. But if we look at the opportunities in front of us as well too, never in any of our lives in this industry have we been at a time where there's more availability to decision-making criteria. That accessibility of information is enabling to all of our organizations to make faster decisions, to make better decisions, more informed decisions. And it's a matter of connecting to those data points. It's a matter of forging those alliances, similar to what we're doing right now with MacroFab. And I think that makes it a very exciting time when it comes to solving problems in this industry in a way that's much more real time.
Yeah, Absolutely, Dan. I think the other thing, that we talk about a lot here at MacroFab is that the issues that are driving today's supply chain crunch aren't going to just be magically resolved, right? There are geopolitical conditions that are going on, outside of just obviously the pandemic, which has been a huge factor in all of this. We've also, seen over the years the concentration of production capacity for different materials into single markets. And so we know, looking forward, the supply chain over the next, couple decades is more likely going to get a little more complex than it is today. So how can we, all work together to get better visibility, to have better planning and, better actions, better actions available to us? Because I think, you can have all the tools in the world, but if you see capacity available somewhere, if you see supply chain, how do you execute on that very, very quickly and outcompete your peers? Those are the kinds of technologies we're working on together to be able to really act upon that information.
Yeah, I'd add one thing to that as well too, Chris, and that is that um, I've been around long enough in this industry, and I know you have, to know that that soft landings are not something that is typical in this industry.
Mhm.
We tend to not just have corrections that occur, but over corrections that occur. And I think data is a way to solve for those problems. We are going to find ourselves in a circumstance, whether it's 12 months from now or 18 or 24, where there's likely going to be a correction or overcorrection that occurs. And I think the organizations that are best informed are going to be the ones that are able to respond to the opportunities that are present when those times do arrive. So I think it's not just about um, positioning yourself as an organization right now to solve today's problems. It's about setting yourself up for future success and aligning yourselves with organizations and companies that are going to enable the best possible decision making.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree, Dan. Michelle, do we have any audience questions today?
Yes, we do.
Excellent.
There's a question. It's a pretty lengthy question, Chris. If you or Dan, you can scroll to the question panel. Um, it's a pretty interesting question and a comment.
Hold on, I'm looking for it here.
Yeah, yeah. It's called the questions. It's a sub tab, or I can just copy.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and read it out for me?
Okay, so our company developed a new electronic product to launch and the prototype is ready. However, as we can see, the electronic component market faces a shortage of products and the prices are also high. The question is there a good time to launch a new product or should you wait for a better opportunity? Having problems with the early adopters might be death of the product.
Yeah, so what I would say here is, as Dan and I mentioned earlier, we see this problem going through the next year at a minimum. We're not really seeing any short-term turnaround in availability. So if you are able to go ahead and start, I would start working on your product. But again, I would look at how you compensate for those components which are unavailable or increasing in price and have multiple options for your project or your product so that when you do get it to market, when you are working with your early customers, you can actually engage those customers and get a product in their hand. It is not going to get magically better in the next 3 months. We're going to be in this for a little while.
Awesome. We have a couple more questions. The next one is, I have used Altium Designer for years, but have never integrated the live linking of stock availability. Could you just briefly explain how to start implementing this in Altium Designer?
Leave that to you, Dan. You know a little more about it than I do.
Yeah, yeah. So what I would say is that first off, I'm not an expert in Altium Designer, so I want to qualify my response by saying that. But what I would say is this: is that the underpinnings to the component search experience, whether it's Altium Designer, any of the Altium design tools, and Octopart, are all the same. So there is component search that it does exist in Altium Designer. It is powered by the same search algorithms, and the underpinnings are the same real-time data that you'd find again on Octopart or on Altium 365, A365. So what I would say is, certainly that capability should be unlocked for you already within the component search experience inside of Altium Designer.
Yeah, I think I saw it the other day. It had the overall like color bars showing the availability
Correct.
of those materials.
Chris, there is one more question for MacroFab. That's a great question. Does MacroFab have any plan or path for submitting part alternates into the original BOM? Submitting a design and then editing the alternates is a pretty tedious process.
Great question. In the next 2 weeks, you will be able to edit your alternate list on the fly at any point in production. We'll be rolling out a whole new, much more exciting, or I say much more exciting, a much more simple and easy to use alternate management process that will be live anywhere in process at any time. We're literally finishing up that release right now.
Great. Any other questions from the listeners? Feel free to type them in. Also, just keep in mind, this is an ongoing series. It's a bi-weekly series that we have. The next one in this webinar series is going to be on November 4th. It's a series between Altium, MacroFab, and Xometry. So in the next part of the series, Xometry is going to be back. They were there in the first one. They're going to come back, and we'll continue this series. We have gotten great responses, so feel free to go to macrofab.com/webinars. That's where all the webinars are. All these webinars are recorded. Once the webinar is complete, within 24 hours, the recorded webinar is uploaded as an on-demand. Most of you guys should also receive an email from us linking you to the on-demand webinar if you want to go listen to it or share with any of your team members. Chris and Dan, awesome webinar. Don't see any more questions coming in. Appreciate everyone's time today.
Right, excellent. Well, thanks for having us, Michelle, and thanks for joining us, everybody. Look forward to seeing you all again in the future at another webinar.
All right, guys, thanks. Bye-bye.